الله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين سيما بقية الله في الأرضين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Dear comrades, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope you're doing really well, inshallah. Today we're going to be talking about insulting, swearing, foul language, and nicknames. When is it actually halal? When is it haram? When can you use these words? Is it acceptable at all to use these words? If so, in what context? Now, I just want to begin by saying it's really sad that I'm having to discuss this in 2026. There's just so much going on in the world. We're on the brink of Iran perhaps facing a ground invasion. I mean, it's insane. It's actually insane. But the reason that this is propped up is because it has become an inhibiting factor in the progression of our discourse. And when we're discussing things and we're trying to actually, express ourselves, oftentimes what we find is that there is a paradigm within the Shia school of thought and among Sunnis as well, which prevents us from speaking freely. And that's a really big problem. And it will become clear to you as we go forward. I will be swearing in this discussion. I'm going to be mentioning swear words, specific swear words and curse words as examples. And I would like to apologize in advance to anybody that this might offend. But, this is just a forewarning that this will be a PG rated lecture, PG-13 maybe. Now, when it comes to the issue of swearing, often what we find is, for example, you'll be on an online forum or you'll be somewhere and you'll be discussing something and somebody will throw out a swear word, okay? And that's when you'll find somebody come along and say, brother, don't use that kind of language. This is unacceptable, brother. Okay. And this is, it might seem on the onset as though this is a sincere and righteous statement and people have the right to do this and that this is a form of nahi anil munkar, forbidding the evil. If you do think like that, that's probably because you haven't worked for a long enough time in the Shia community. When you have worked in the Shia community for a long enough time, you're going to realize that actually this kind of behavior is extremely inhibiting. It stops the progression of the discussion and instead shifts the focus to merely a certain swear word or curse word which was used. And therefore what happens is that the entirety of the discourse, which is actually really important, gets brushed aside for a much smaller thing. And this is going to become much clearer as we go forward. Now, the first thing that I often do is when I encounter such people who are, they're always saying, brother, swearing is haram, brother, is say, can you bring me a hadith? Can you bring me a hadith to prove that it's wrong to swear? To date, nobody has actually done that. To date, nobody has actually done that. Even though when you're interacting with youths and you're talking to people online, this is something that occurs all the time. And somebody's foul language will be used as evidence for them being completely astray. Okay? So the first question that I ask is, do you have a hadith? And it's always a blank reply. It's always like, no, they just disappear after that. Then you go to the next phase, you're like, okay, even more important than that, do you have a verse of the Quran to prove that it's haram and therefore you should focus your attention here? Again, they won't come forward with anything. And then you have to go to the next phase, which is, do you have a fatwa? Because unfortunately, in the Shia world, people don't care about a hadith, they don't care about the Quran. Do you have a fatwa? We want to know what the marjas have said. Okay, and even in that department, they won't be able to find a fatwa. And I'd be really shocked and astonished if somebody comes forward with a fatwa saying it is haram to swear. Imagine if you're in court and you're having to repeat what somebody else has said and they have sworn. and you've sworn an oath on the Quran or on the Bible to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so help me Lord, but you're now not going to repeat exactly what they said because it's haram to swear. So we have to first of all understand that there are certain contexts in which it is acceptable and in fact necessary to swear. Okay, now on the onset it's going to sound like I'm trying to justify swearing. In some regard, I am. But in another sense, no, I'm saying that there's a certain reason for why this needs to be discussed at this stage. Okay, for the first time in the history of me being on the internet, somebody actually came forward with a link to Mizan al-Hikmah, which is a fantastic book. I would highly recommend it. It's just basically a list of a hadith that can really help you to understand a lot of the Islamic discourse and akhlaq and those kinds of issues. And there's a section about swearing, but when I started to look at those sections, I was like, hold on a second, this isn't correlating. So you go to the Arabic and you find out that actually it's been translated wrong. It's actually completely out of context. And I actually found these hadith in Al-Kafi as well. So, you know, they are in our books, and that's what I'm going to be discussing today. Okay, so the first hadith that I want to go over with you, and this is to demonstrate how some of these ideas can be misconstrued. The Holy Prophet ﷺ said, no sooner does obscene language accompany something than it disgraces it. And no sooner does modesty accompany something than it adorns it. That's exactly how it's written. This is the translation that you'll find online. But that's not what the hadith is actually saying. Okay, so if you go to the Arabic, what is it saying? مَا كَانَ الْفُحْشُ فِي شَيْءٍ قَدْ إِلَّا شَأْنَهُ. Never will you find al-fuhsh in a thing except that it will decrease from its sha'an, from its majesty, from its beauty, from its glory. وَلَا كَانَ الْحَيَاءُ فِي شَيْءٍ قَدْ إِلَّا زَانَهُ. And you'll never find modesty in something except that it will, you know, increase its beauty, it will adorn it. Okay, so that's actually what this hadith is saying. But the way it's been translated is something else entirely. All right, so it's actually saying whenever you put al-fuhsh into something, it brings down its sha'an, its majesty, its glory, its beauty. Okay? And the opposite is also true. So if you bring modesty into something, it's always going to increase its adornment, its beauty. All right, so this is a beautiful hadith. And I want to give you an example, right? First of all, before I give you the example, what is al-fuhsh? Al-fuhsh, if you go to Farsi, for example, they will think that it means insult, right? Foul language. So, for example, in Farsi, if somebody said, "Ishun be man fosh dade," it would mean he has dissed me, he's insulted me. But that's not what it means in the Arabic context. Al-fuhsh means obscenity, something obscene, okay, something dirty. And now, with this correct understanding, you'll see how much sense the hadith actually makes. And I'll give you an example. Think of a Disney movie. It's so beautifully made. Look at the colors, look at the bright, the contrast, look at the movements, the animation style. It's all so gorgeous. But it has certain indecent things in there. Sexualized iconography, images which are perhaps designed to activate parts of the child's brain at a time where they shouldn't be activated. Kissing scenes, for example, to give a very glaringly obvious example. That actually brings down the sha'an of something. It brings down all that beauty and all the effort that's gone into that animation. Right? So in this sense, if they had just implemented modesty instead, that would be a masterpiece, a flawless masterpiece. But because they've introduced certain sexualized images, that is going to decrease from its sha'an. I'll give you another example. Think of a beautiful woman who's aging gracefully, you know, and she looks beautiful. And I'm not saying this in a perverted way, but a woman is beautiful in and of itself and the right of it being a woman, you know. But she's aging gracefully. What does she do? She introduces al-fuhsh, al-fahsha. She plasters herself with makeup, or perhaps she gets cosmetic surgery. And then you see that potentially beautiful woman, she's now become something very strange. And this is something that we're seeing a lot in the celebrity world also, where women, celebrities, who could have aged gracefully, they're actually putting implants in and all sorts of things which appeal to the male gaze. And because of that, the sha'n has actually come down. All right, and that's just an example for us to all understand. And from this kind of an understanding, you can really see how beautiful this hadith is and what it's actually talking about. Because whenever you inject fuhsh into something, it becomes less. Whenever you introduce modesty into something, it actually becomes more. It becomes beautiful, more beautified. But this same hadith, look at the context that it's been given by many of the scholars and the translators, which has actually limited the scope of the hadith entirely and just said, oh, it's about obscene language. It's not. All right, I'll give you another example. It says, Imam Ali alayhi salam said, a person of dignity would never use obscene language. Again, what does the Arabic say? Ma afhasha karimun qat. Never would a kareem person, a noble person, a dignified person have al-fuhsh. He won't do al-fuhsh. Okay? Now, if you limit it to the way that the translation is, and think of it as just obscene language or foul language, first of all, that's just not true. Okay? Because there's plenty of dignified people who have used foul language, and we're going to give you examples going forward. Even some of the shuhada in Karbala, for example, they have used insulting words, all right? But it doesn't make sense in this context. You have to understand it through the lens of what al-fuhsh actually means. It means obscenity. Again, I'm going to bring it back to this idea of obscenity, to do something obscene, and that does make sense. See, a dignified person would never do something obscene. Okay, so let me just explain to you what obscene means, and I hope you don't find this patronizing, because I know a lot of you already know what I mean when I say obscene, but many people won't be familiar with the term, they won't understand what it means. Obscene is something sexually explicit. It's something really dirty, filthy. And just to give you an example from school. When I was in school, kids, and this is something that you guys might have experienced all the time, in Western schools, I don't know if it's the same in Eastern schools, they would draw genitalia on tables and walls and graffiti it all over the place. That's al-fuhsh. It's really disturbing as well. And then later on in life, I actually watched a movie called Superbad, and in there it shows how one of the characters actually was obsessed with drawing male genitalia everywhere. And then I realized, oh my God, this is actually a phenomenon. It's not just my weird school. All right, so that's an example. Right? This is fuhshi behavior, and that's not something that a dignified person would do. All right, so this is how the hadith makes sense. But the hadith is being used to say what? Oh, you'd never swear. That doesn't make sense. All right, I'll give you another example. Imam Baqir alayhi salam. And by the way, I'm going to post all of these hadith, inshallah, on the channel so that you can all see them for yourself. You can investigate for yourself and find out, if what I'm saying is correct or incorrect. Rather than just trust me, I would prefer you to do things like that. Imam Baqir alayhi salam said, Allah hates the user of obscene language and the one who is shameless with it. That's how the translation says it. But is that what the hadith is saying? Well, in this example, maybe. Inna Allah yubghidul fahish al mutafahish. Okay, so I actually discussed this just earlier with Sayyid Abdullah because it's a little bit tricky putting these two words together. So it's using the same idea here, al-fuhsh, but it's emphatic, you know. Al-mutafahish, like he's constantly doing fuhsh, he's constantly being obscene. But again, it comes back to that theme of doing something obscene rather than swearing. Don't worry, I am going to come to examples where it does prove that, you know, you should control swearing and stuff. I'm not justifying it entirely. Al-fahish is one who is obscene or indecent or a foul person. Now, many of us will be familiar with the term al-fahisha. Fahisha literally means like a really nasty woman, a dirty woman, or a prostitute, for example. Al-mutafahish is saying a person like it's emphatically in that way. Okay, so again, these are not necessarily talking about swearing and foul language. Rather, they're talking about a certain type of behavior. And again, I want to give you like an example of this kind of behavior so that you can really grasp your head around it rather than just trying to understand it conceptually. For example, comedians, right? In the modern world, you'll see a lot of comedians doing this, where a lot of their jokes are just, they're just nasty, nasty jokes to the point of it just being so obscene. Stand-up comedians will do this, right? Where they have sexually explicit themes. Or, for example, Borat, if any of you have watched the movie, or if you haven't, you know, you can Google it, but the comedian behind that also, you know, some of the jokes are just outrageously al-fuhsh. You know, there's one scene where, astaghfirullah, you know, I won't describe it, but there's nudity, you know, and homosexual themes also. So this is what it means. A person who's emphatically and whose entire personality becomes something which is very, very nasty. Who's that fat comedian again? I've forgotten her. But a lot of female comedians tend to fall into this trap where almost every single joke of theirs is about nasty, sexually explicit things. And it just, even for Western non-Muslim audiences, it becomes nasty. And it's like, why am I even watching this? This is just disgusting. It's not even funny. Okay, so that's what we're talking about here. It's not necessarily about swearing, okay? And you're going to see that swearing is, in certain contexts, insulting people, I mean, is actually not only allowed, it's sometimes necessary. Imam Baqir alayhi salam, going on to the next hadith, he said, say unto people the best of what you would like them to say to you. For Allah hates the curser, swearer, and slanderer of the believers, the user of obscene language, and to do it shamelessly, and the importunate beggar. But don't worry about that part. But anyway, the hadith says, sorry, I keep on adjusting my sitting position. It's just, قُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ أَحْسَنَ مَا تُحِبُّونَ أَن يُقَالَ لَكُمْ. Say to people the best of what you would love for them to say to you. It's a very beautiful hadith. All right. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ يُبْغِضُ اللَّعَانَ السَّبَّابَ الطَّعَانَ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Allah hates the one who's constantly cursing, al-la'an, right? When we say it in English and we translate it to cursing, it doesn't have the same meaning per se, because cursing, you could think that I'm referring to swear words. It's not talking about swear words. It's talking about literally cursing. When you send la'an on someone, you're cursing them. Like when you say la'anatullah alaykum, may Allah curse you. Okay, so it's saying a person who's constantly swearing, astaghfirullah, not swearing, cursing in that sense. As-sabbab, this literally means insulting, constantly insulting. At-ta'an, and at-ta'an, it means, you know, somebody who's actually slandering now. You know, he's always saying evil things about people. So But the context again is really, really important. Alal mu'mineen. Somebody who does these things against the believers. And this person is al-fahish al-mutafahish. Again, this same phrase, a person who's habitually, and it's become a part of their behavior and constant way of behaving is full of profanity and obscenity and vulgarity. Okay, so this here is giving you a certain context. Now, it's a very important discussion that we're about to open up here, because the first line of the hadith actually says, قُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ أَحْسَنَ مَا تُحِبُّونَ أَن يُقَالَ لَكُمْ. Say to people that which is best and you would love for them to talk to you in that way. So it's essentially saying that talk to people in a way that you would love to be talked to. And this is really the key here. It's really, really important to understand this in the context of swearing and foul language. Okay? Because the hadith, again, it doesn't necessitate the idea of swearing. It's not specifically about swearing. It's talking about a certain behavior which certain people adopt, which is nasty. All right? Constantly cursing, constantly insulting, constantly slandering, and just abusing people for no reason. Okay? And I want to give you an example of how the situation completely reverses. There is a word which the community brotherlilies will often use, and that word is so horrible for me. It is so disgusting for me. I hate hearing that word now, and I would never call anybody that word, nor do I want anybody to call me that word. And that word is brother. I can't stand the word brother. And again, if you haven't been working and interacting with the Shia community for a significant amount of time, you won't understand why I'm saying this. The word brother essentially is a beautiful word. You know, the Holy Quran says, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. Surely the believers are ikhwa, they're brothers to each other. You know, so it's actually a beautiful word, brother. But, and by the way, like, if you look at the movie Malcolm X, when you hear them calling each other brother, it is a beautiful word. And they're actually saying it sincerely, like they actually believe themselves to be each other's brothers. That is not how the word is used in the modern context, in the Shia world. And what you might notice is that people will say brother, not in an endearing way, but it's always followed up with some sort of insult. And what they're doing is they're using the word brother now. The word brother has been weaponized by these people in order to actually bring you down. And you'll notice they'll say things like, brother, this is haram, or brother, that is not the way we should speak. So it's always followed by something negative. Always followed by something negative. Almost always. And so what they're actually doing when they're saying brother is denigrating you. They're bringing your status down. They're actually saying it to not to show that they have real wilaya and brotherhood and love for you, but actually to just say that you're less than your status actually is. Again, you might not understand this, but there are certain people who, on the other hand, who might refer to you with the most profane word, right? They might even use the F word when they're talking to you, but it's out of love. قُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ أَحْسَنَ مَا تُحِبُّونَ أَن يُقَالَ لَكُمْ. Speak to people in the way that you wish to be spoken to. All right, and sometimes you have to differentiate between these two things. Somebody could say, you bugger, but they're actually saying it out of love because you're a close friend of theirs. You see how that's different to a complete stranger saying, brother, you're completely wrong, brother. Yeah, it's a massive difference. These types of people, by the way, the word that we use to describe them is brotherlilies. And the reason that we came up with this term is because they're always using the word brother, and they are actually essentially like lilies. They're pansies. They're really, really, oh, they're just so annoying. I can't stand them. And their understanding of Islam is completely obscured. But they are basically the ones who are running all the little community centers, and they're everywhere, and their priorities are so messed up that I'm having to do this lecture today. So when it comes to swearing, another important factor is subjectivity. It's an extremely subjective issue. And I want to give you an example for this. I remember I was talking to my mother-in-law on the phone, and she said, how are the kids? And I said, oh, the little rascals, they're just running around and playing. And she gasped. She almost fell out of her chair. She was like, oh, what did you just call them? Rascals? How could you possibly refer to your own children as rascals? And I was like, wait, what are you talking about? And it turns out that in the Indo-Pak culture, the word rascal is really bad. Like, it's like saying the B word or the C word even, right? It's horrible in their context. But for us, it's like rascals is like, it's a completely normal thing to call children. It just means naughty little children. It's like saying rugrats, right? So, and this is how important this is how subjective this issue can actually be. It's a highly culturalized issue. There's some households where some things are entirely acceptable. Entirely acceptable. They'll be saying the F word, they'll be saying the C word, the B word, every word there is. And it's completely normal in that household. If you or I were to hear it, we'd be like, oh my God, that is revolting. How can you do that? This is completely unacceptable. We are similar in this, like to my mother-in-law, right? So when she hears the word rascal, she's like, oh! But for them, it's just like saying the word rascal. Okay, so there is an Islamic term that we use to describe this, and it's called urf. Urf. It's what's urfan acceptable. So the societal norms. The societal norms matter. And what we see is over the passage of time, meanings change. So once upon a time, if I had said bloody hell, that would be considered, oh my God, that's terrible. How could you say bloody hell? Oh, you said bloody hell. But now, thanks to Harry Potter, I blame Harry Potter, it's seen as such a mellow thing to say. It's seen as a completely normal, a very mild way of swearing. Back in my day, it was really bad. You couldn't say bloody hell and get away with it. Now, bloody hell, good. I'll give you another example. If you've seen the movie Back to the Future, it reminds me of that, actually. There's a scene where the protagonist is basically teaching his father, he's gone back in time and he's teaching his father how to stand up to bullies. And he says, get your damn hands off her. And then he immediately freezes and he says, do I really need to swear? And that was seen as funny when the movie came out, because damn is no longer considered a swear word. But back in the day, I don't know, the 60s or whenever it was set, it was considered as really, really bad. But again, it's really important to look at the context. Notice how the main character is teaching his father how to stand up to bullies. In certain contexts, and this is again an urfi subject, right? It's about societal norms. In certain contexts, you have to swear when you're facing up to bullies. And I think, since I've touched on the subject now, teaching children that they should never swear, never, and that even if somebody swears at them, they shouldn't swear back, I don't know if this is actually the right approach to take. Sometimes when you're in school and kids swear at you, If you stand there like a self-righteous lily and you say, that is unacceptable, I'm going to tell the teacher. I mean, how are you going to survive in the real world? Like, how are these kids going to survive in the real? That is not the way it works. Anyway, we'll talk more about that as we go forward, inshallah. But really what it's about is about softening language. And so much of our translations have softened what the Ahlulbayt has actually said. It's reduced the meaning of certain things. And that's actually thrown our entire balance off. Sometimes it's been so detrimental to our complete and perfect understanding of Islam, or even the basics of Islam, that we have failed to understand the real living message of Islam. And I'll give you an example. I'll give you a couple of examples, in fact, of how this has happened. The first example is one that we've touched on already, and that's la'an. La'an, what does it mean? It means cursing, right? Wrong. It doesn't mean cursing. Everywhere you go, la'an will be translated as cursing. So if so-and-so said la'ana on such and such person, he was saying, oh, I cursed this person. All right, and that's how it's been translated, and that's how I've been saying it also. Okay, but that's not the real meaning. When you send la'an on someone, it is actually a complete condemnation of that person. You're not just cursing them. When you curse, even the word curse, look at the value of the word curse in the English language. First of all, it could be misconstrued, again, as swearing, but it can also mean like a black magic curse. So what curse are we talking about here? Petrificus totalis? Avada Kedavra? You know, and when any language, it has separate meanings for the same word, it can sometimes detract from the very direct meaning of the word itself. La'an is a complete condemnation, and we actually have a word in English which has been established since biblical times, or whenever the Bible was translated to English, that perfectly demonstrates what la'an actually is, and that word is damn. All right, so when I say la'ana be on Yazid, I'm not saying curse be upon Yazid, I'm actually saying damn Yazid. Damn him. When we say la'anatullah alaykum, it doesn't mean the curse of Allah be upon you. It means God damn you. And look at how much more eloquent that is actually. You know, and so what, we've not only detracted from the real meaning of the words in Arabic, but we've actually made it even lengthier so that when you're reading certain texts in English, it becomes so convoluted. I don't know why the initial translators did this, but it's affected our entire understanding of the deen. Because later scholars, when they picked up on it in the English world, they just pick up on the same translation and they go ahead with that, right? So it's actually so powerful. When Sayyidah Zainab salamullah alayha, she's saying, la'ana be upon Ahl Kufa, la'ana be on Yazid. She's saying, God damn you. God damn you, people of Kufa. God damn you, Yazid. All right, look at how much more powerful that really is. I'll give you another example. Imam Hussein alayhi salam. We've all heard this saying. Everybody's heard it. Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah has said it from the pulpit. Everybody has heard it, and it's repeated over and over again. Our slogan is made out of it. ألا وإن الداعي ابن الداعي قد ركزني بين اثنتين بين السلة والذلة وهيهات من الذلة. Surely the da'i, son of the da'i, has placed me between two things, between death and humiliation. Never will I accept humiliation. How is it translated? Surely the son of the illegitimately born, has placed me between two things. It's like, what does that even mean? Who would speak like that? Just think about it for a moment. You're surrounded by sharks, bloodthirsty vermin who want to slay you and raid your women and take away their jewelry, burn your tents, trample your body, put your head on a spear. They have betrayed you. They have been complete traitors. And you're going to stand there and say, illegitimately born. It doesn't make sense. No. Da'i literally means bastard. That's what it means. Bastard. And that's what Imam Hussein alayhi salam was saying. That might shock you, dear brothers, dear sisters. But you have to understand that if you were alive in the time of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, maybe what he said would have shocked you too. And so this all plays in to this completely convoluted mess that we have made of the religion and our understanding of the Ahlulbayt alayhimus salam. We have painted them as astaghfirullah, pansies. We've painted them as really soft people. They weren't. They were gangsters. They were tough people. In Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he was placed in the desert in childhood. Why? So that he could be raised among the ruffians, the rough kids in the street, so that when he grows up, he knows how to deal with them, so that he won't be afraid of them, so that he will be able to stand up against the greater tyrants. The Ahlulbayt have been completely mischaracterized. And what the brotherlilies are doing is weaponizing that mischaracterization instead of deconstructing it and saying, actually, they weren't like that. Actually, they weren't so soft. Actually, they would speak really harshly. Instead of saying those things, they're just going along with it because it justifies their own cowardice and their own softness. I want to give you another example. Rahbar, Imam Khamenei, Shaheed. I remember when Trump first ripped up the JCPOA, the deal that Iran had made with America. Rahbar was outraged and he said, I told you this is what America will do. Obama makes a deal, right? Then Trump comes along and he said, in ahmaq miyad wo pare pare mikone. This fool comes along and he rips it up. The word ahmaq, in both Arabic and Farsi, you translate it as fool. And that's perfectly acceptable. And I'm not saying that translation is wrong, because when you're translating the words of such great individuals, sometimes you do need to, make it more acceptable for people. But I'm saying between us now, we have to understand that the way that Rahbar said it, a more precise and perfect translation in the context of our 2026 world would be retard. He called Trump a retard. That is much closer to the actual meaning that Rahbar was conveying. This retard comes along and rips it up. Now, doesn't that make much more sense? Of course it does. Because nobody uses words like fool, generally speaking, in the same way that ahmaq would be used in Farsi. I'll give you another example. Our slogan, Marg bar Amrika, Al-Maut li Amrika. Okay? This slogan, when it's translated, and this is a very, very tangible example that you can all see for yourself in the modern world, right? How is it translated? Down with America. Down with America. You mean we're throwing our fists up in the air? We're screaming at the top of our lungs, down with America? You see how much the real meaning of it has been softened? That's not what it means. It literally means death to America. But that's not how it's often translated. Okay, but even the phrase death to America is the most accurate translation of this. But does that perfectly convey what we actually mean when we say death to America? No, it doesn't. Okay, because when we say death to America, and Imam Khamenei has explained this, I think numerous times, and we've explained it numerous times anyway as well. He said it doesn't mean, because when you say death to America, some people might assume it means the people of America. We want them all to die. No, of course not. Astaghfirullah. It means the officials. It means the Epstein clientele. It means the the government of America. We want it to die. We want it to be destroyed. Okay, so death to America, I'm not speaking against the slogan. I'm totally for the slogan. But I'm just trying to open up our minds to make us understand this in the context of swearing and things like that. The more accurate way to convey that in the modern world would be F America. Because that's generally what we're saying. When you say F to America, everybody understands. It means we're done with America. We don't care about America. Screw America. We don't want any negotiations with America. We don't want anything to do with America. And if America wants to fight us, then we're going to fight them to the death. That's what it means. F America is much more, like, in our social context, much closer to the meaning of what we mean by death to America. Okay. Now, am I saying that that's what we should put up on our flags? No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm trying to make us understand that if we see somebody saying F America online, it is not our duty to go to them and say, brother, don't use such language, brother. That is really pathetic. Really, really pathetic. And we have much more important things to be dealing with. All right? It is not scholarly at all to do something like that. But that's what the culture has become. So a lofty statement that somebody might make, because it has swearing in it for the purpose of emphasis, and that emphasis is totally justified, people will say, no, this is not right, brother. Say down, down to America. Just go away, bugger off. Right? Astaghfirullah. Anyway, next hadith. Imam Baqir alayhi salam said, the weapon of the wicked is foul language. What does the hadith actually say? Silahul la'ami qabihul kalam. The weapon of the vile, al-la'am is like a really evil, horrible person, is qabihul kalam, ugly speech. Ugly speech. Now again, this cannot be used to totally target swearing. It can't. I know that we want swearing to be haram, but it's not. All right? And this is actually talking about ugly speech. What is ugly speech? Ugly speech could be so many different things. Ugly speech, it could be flowery. It could be, at least apparently, the most perfect and beautiful seeming eloquent and non-profane words. But the meaning is actually very, very evil and despicable. And this is what the brotherlilies often do. They won't swear, maybe, publicly, but they will use certain words in an ugly way, right? They will say, for example, that they'll slander or abuse somebody, or they will actually insult somebody in the nicest, most flowery way, right? And it goes back to the example of calling somebody brother, right? And again, you're only going to understand this if you have to interact with such people for any amount of time. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam also said, a person whose foul tongue people dread is in the fire. Damn, that is really, really harsh. That's how it's translated. But when you actually look at man khafa an-nasu lisanahu fahuwa fi nar, it's saying whoever's tongue is feared, that person is in the hellfire. Okay, and this is obviously, it's not talking about just foul language. It's talking about anyone whose tongue you fear, right? So an evil oppressor, for example, a tyrant, he will say something, or he could just with his tongue give the order for you to be executed. You know, in this sense, yeah, he's going to be in the fire. But blooming, I don't know, like some guy he just swears. Like how can you take such a lofty hadith and bring it down to the level of, oh, this guy's sworn, you're in the fire, brother? What are you doing? What have you done to our deen? Astaghfirullah. And I want to give you another example of this, because this has happened as well. There are certain people who might not swear, but when they talk, you're afraid of what they're going to say because they are so rude, they're so hurtful in the things that they say. You're afraid of their tongue, actually. Such people, it's talking about such people. All right. Now, I want to give you another hadith which would demonstrate this in a okay, I'm just going to read the hadith, okay? So it says 3 qualities. If they're found in a man, then do not hesitate to say he is in the hellfire. Al-jafa wal-jubn wal-bukhl. Okay, what do these mean? Al-jafa is basically, it's a horrible person. They cut ties with people. They ignore people who need them. He's just a nasty person. Wal-jubn, really important point here, cowards. Wal-bukhl, tip of my tongue, stingy, a person who's stingy, right? So, but the hadith is saying if you find all 3 of these traits in one person, right, in one man, in fact, then don't hesitate to say that they're in the fire. And I want to highlight the jubn part because it's despicable. How can you as a man be a coward? It's horrible. It's horrible to see. It's despicable. How can you be a Muslim? How can you have iman, faith, and still be a coward? Anyway, then these 3 traits, if you find them in a woman, don't hesitate to say that she's in the fire. Al-bada' wal-khuyala' wal-fujur. Al-bada', what is that? Any hurtful speech, profanity, sexually explicit, or it's a very inclusive word, by the way, and we're going to show you more hadith about this specific word because this is more specific to swearing. All the hadith that we've covered so far, I hope I've demonstrated that they are actually not talking about swearing. Al-bida', though, it's a very inclusive word. It's not just about obscenity, it's about hurtful speech, all right? And Wal-khuyala', conceit, arrogance. Wal-fujur, wickedness and adultery-esque nature, okay? So, there's just another hadith for you to think about or contemplate about. But I just wanted to give you one hadith here, which might seem out of place, but I wanted to share it with you because it is a really important point. The Holy Prophet ﷺ, he said that a prostitute was forgiven when she passed a panting dog, almost dying of thirst, at the foot of a well. So what she did is she took her hijab, she tied it around her shoe, she lowered it down into the well, brought some water out for the dog, and because of this action, she was forgiven. Now, some people might, they'll look at this hadith, they'll be like, how is that possible? No, there are certain traits that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking for. And when those traits appear in a person, they are far more important and they outshine a lot of the other issues. This is a prostitute we're talking about, a person who sold their body for for a bit of dunya. And a lot of prostitutes, they're forced into this kind of behavior. It's not often their fault. But in this case, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pointing out kindness. To have a kind heart is really, really important. And I guess the reason I wanted to put this hadith here is just to remind you that, look, Islam has given us certain priorities, and those are far, far more important than a lot of the things that we have actually given priority to. Okay? And the reason it plays into this discussion is because swearing is really a non-issue, guys. It's really not that important. It's not haram, okay? It's not anything like that. It's just one of those societal urfi things that in some cultures some words are unacceptable and in others they're not. Okay? And people who use swear words, they should be careful where they use the swear words. And often they are. Unless you find somebody who's just swearing all the time or saying profane things all the time and making, really nasty al-fuhshi behaviors all the time. All right, I want to share another hadith with you, okay? So there's this guy, and he has a fight. not a physical fight, a verbal fight with his camel driver. All right, and then he comes back, and Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, beware of being obscene, loud, and quarrelsome, or one who frequently curses. And so the narrator says, by Allah, it happened to me because he wronged me. The Imam alayhi salam says, even if he wronged you, you went beyond the proper limit in your response. Indeed, this is not from my way, nor do I command my followers to act in this manner. Seek forgiveness from your Lord and do not do it again. I said, I seek forgiveness from Allah and I will not do it again. Okay, so this hadith, it highlights to you that there are certain behaviors that people might show, and the Ahlulbayt have told them, this behavior is wrong. And in this particular case, it's about swearing or not slandering, cursing, insulting somebody. And the Imam alayhi salam tells him, this is wrong. I don't want you to behave like this. All right. The context matters, guys. The context is really, really important. This is an ordinary situation, okay, with an ordinary person. He's just some camel driver, in a modern context. I don't know. It's just a taxi driver or just some guy in the market or something like that. He's wronged you, right? And you get angry and you swear and you curse at them and you say lots of things, right? This kind of behavior is not acceptable and you should try not to do that. All right? But there are certain contexts where it is entirely acceptable. It really does depend. And I want to give you some examples of that, right? So, Rahbar, Imam Khomeini, Shaheed, when he was in prison, this guy, this comedian, he was making lots of jokes and Rahbar was laughing and everybody was, they were laughing. He's entertaining the prisoners. I saw this in a BBC documentary that was really, really trying hard to paint Imam Khomeini in a bad light, and it just it failed so miserably. They used every technique in the book, fade out to black, non-diegetic, dark music, but it just didn't work. They were trying to paint Rahbar badly. Anyway, he's in this prison, and he's the comedian's making these jokes. Then the comedian starts to make a nasty joke, dirty joke. All right, about women, for example. Al-fuhsh, right? At this point, Imam Khomeini says, don't do that. All right, so he says, no, it's better if you don't do that, and he stops him. All right, and that's when the BBC documentary just fades to black. Oh my God, look, he's censoring. But it didn't work because it's like, well, look at the context, right? They're in prison, all right? These men don't have access to their wives, and you're going to start making profane jokes about women. You're going to put dirty, filthy things into their minds. What's going to happen? Haram is going to happen. That's what's going to happen. So Imam Khomeini stepped in, right? All right, so context really, really is important. Am I telling you that you could swear in front of your parents? No, don't swear in front of your parents. Nobody should swear in front of your parents. Children, what about children? Should you shelter your children to such an extent that they never hear swearing? And if they do, you cover their ears. Oh, okay. No, it's much more sensible to let them hear it, explain to them, this is a bad word, don't use this word. And it might be a better approach to actually do this than for them to go into the world, go into their schools, find out about all these bad words, and then they won't actually know when and where to use these words. And they might end up using it in the wrong context. Okay? Okay, so this is a little bit tricky, but I'm going to try my best to get this across to you. Sometimes swearing can help. It can really help. Like when? I want to give you two examples from two excellent movies. All right, so the first example is Sixth Sense. The Sixth Sense, there's a scene where the boy is walking down the street. This little boy, he's extremely disturbed. He's walking down the street with his psychiatrist. I won't give away the ending, but if you haven't watched The Sixth Sense already by now, I mean, what's wrong with you? But anyway, the boy says, "Oh, this bully, and he calls me a freak, and I am a freak." And then the psychiatrist, he turns around and he goes, "That's bullshit. Don't let anybody ever tell you that." And then they carry on walking. And the boy goes, "Oh, you said the S word." It's a very cute scene, but it shows how even with children, sometimes what you say, when you say a very adult word in front of them, it can actually help. It can help their self-esteem. It can help them grow. It can help them realize that they're not the freaks that the bullies in school, for example, think that they are. All right, and this is extremely important, guys. And I'm giving you examples from movies, but that doesn't mean that you haven't experienced this in your own life. When you're going through some sort of pain, or you know you've had a terrible day or something, or somebody's been awful to you, and you see that a friend of yours swears at them, it makes you feel so good. It lightens your heart. And the idea here is that swearing in certain contexts is a form of eloquence because it actually helps you to emphasize your point in a way that no other words could. Second example is from About a Boy. About a Boy is, again, one of my favorite movies. You can watch it over and over again. So the boy in About a Boy, again, it's another troubled boy. It's a troubled youth. His mother has just is severely depressed, and she's attempted suicide. And so every single I'm making the movie sound really dark, but it's not as dark as it sounds. It's actually a rom-com, and it's fun to watch, and you should definitely watch it. But anyway, the boy, he's expressing how he goes to the guy's house because he doesn't want to face school. He doesn't want to face life anymore. He doesn't want to look at anything or be reminded of it anymore. And the main character, Will, he goes, he's a very shallow guy, but at this point, he can never empathize with other people. But at this point, he says, "Oh," he goes, "effing hell," you know. And the boy goes, he's just stunned. He's like, How did he just say that? And then he says later on, "I don't know why it made me feel better, but it did." All right. So these are examples, again, but you can really, if you dig, you're going to find examples in your own life where this has helped you. And the reason I'm telling you this is because, dear brother and sister, dear brothers, dear sisters, dear comrades, if your friend, your comrade, your brother, your sister, your actual close companion is going through a hard time, a difficult time, and you swear against their enemies, right? That's actually, it might be a good thing, right? If you swear in certain instances to uplift a believer, it's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it might be a really good thing. Furthermore, if you see that somebody close to you is going through a really difficult time, and for example, they're really, really angry, and a swear word slips out of their mouth, please, for the sake of God, at that particular moment, don't try and preach to them. Don't go to them and be like, my dear brother, it is haram to swear. That is the worst thing that you could say to them at that very moment. I learned that the hard way. And if you don't take my advice, you're going to learn that the hard way too. Okay, at that point, that's not the time to preach to them because they're going through something. And you have to understand that this is about how we express ourselves. And you need to make your brethren feel comfortable around you. They shouldn't feel like they have to constantly police their tongues. And what we see in the Shia community is so many environments where people are just constantly policing their own tongues. Even if they're righteous, good, decent, believing individuals, they don't feel like they can express themselves or say what's actually in their heart. And this is not how Islam is supposed to be. All right? So there is a verse of the Quran which says, and this is the other side of the argument, that when you face a calamity, you should say, "Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un." We are for Allah, and to Allah we return. And that takes a lot of spiritual energy and effort to get to a point where when you're going through something and you're really, really under a lot of pressure, you say that instead of swearing. If we can get to that stage, fantastic. But I'm trying to explain that it's actually normal for people to swear. And if you do swear, I don't want you to think that, oh, you know, I've fallen from Allah's grace. Man, get over it. It's a non-issue, for crying out loud. And me and a close comrade of mine, we came up with this absolutely fantastic sketch. This sketch highlights perfectly what we are talking about, all right? And I want you to imagine the sketch until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens up the door and we're actually able to make these cartoons and sketches that we so desperately want to make to get the message out. I want you to imagine that a Palestinian is, he falls to his knees because all of his family has been massacred in front of his eyes. There's blood everywhere. There's blood on his hands. There's blood on his face. He wipes his hand across his face and he looks at the blood of his own family member who he had just now been laughing and joking with. And now his hand is stained with that blood. And he looks up and he sees these missiles coming from the Israelis towards him. And at that moment, he stands up, he clenches his fist, and he says, "You sons of bitches," at the top of his voice. And a superhero comes out of nowhere. BL is written on his chest, and he has his cape billowing in the wind. He is super brotherlily, and he lands next to him. He puts his hand around his shoulder and he says, "Brother, it is haram to swear, brother. Would the Ahlulbayt speak this way, brother?" And the Palestinian just turns around and he goes, "You're absolutely right. Thank you, brother. I almost strayed from the right path." And then the brotherlily says, "It's okay, my dear brother." And he flies away. That's the sketch. Did you like it? Fantastic sketch, right? Well, this hopefully illustrates exactly what we are talking about. Sometimes we are so angered and we are so full of frustration and pain and anguish. And when we want to express it publicly, the haram police come out of nowhere and start, instead of talking about the discourse and the point itself, they point fingers at the way that it was expressed. This is pathetic and it needs to stop. And it's not going to stop. I want to give you some examples now. Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. From Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Because this is an argument that they often use. Would the Ahlulbayt talk like that, brother? Brother, you don't even know the Ahlulbayt. Stop pretending that you do. You've created this fantasy fiction idea of the Ahlulbayt being these perfect and prim and stiff upper-lipped individuals who just walk around like, astaghfirullah rabbi wa atubu ilayh. That is not your Imam. Your Imam, alayhi salam, if he was alive today, you would be shocked. You'd be like, "Oh, brother, how could you speak like that?" I want to give you an example. The Imam alayhi salam, what did he say? He said, "Yabna ra'iyatil ma'az." Right? He's speaking to the enemies. He's speaking to the enemies. What does he say? "O son of the goat herder woman, you are more deserving of it as one to burn in it." So Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he's in the battlefield. Astaghfirullah rabbi wa atubu ilayh. Astaghfirullah rabbi wa atubu ilayh. He's in the battlefield. He's in Karbala. He's facing the worst people. And one of them says, he says, "May the fire of hell burn you," or something disgusting like that to the Imam of the time. And the Imam turns around and says, "O son of the goat herder woman." This is how it's translated. All right, and even if you try and look it up or try to decipher what it's saying, it's going to sound very, very strange. And it doesn't matter where you go, you're always going to see this, goat herder woman. He's talking to Shimr. He's not saying goat herder woman. He's saying, "You son of a vile, sexually explicit woman." And we have a word to describe what this actually is. And it's a biblical term. And that term is whore. Whore. That's what Imam Hussein alayhi salam was actually alluding to. He was saying, oh, you son of a whore, you are more worthy of it, of the hellfire. And that makes much more sense. And these brotherlilies and those who have mischaracterized the Ahlulbayt will never understand this. And they literally think that the Ahlulbayt never got angry on the battlefield, that their companions floated around with absolute grace. Jesus Christ, man, honestly, you people need to get over yourselves. It wasn't like that. What bubble are we living in, honestly? Have you never been in a fight? Have you never been in an environment where you're surrounded by thugs? Of course you haven't. And we're going to come on to that in a moment. But this is what I want you to understand, is that in Arab culture, when they say the son of the father's name, right? But usually when they say the son of and they name the mother, it's an insult. It's actually an insult, and it's actually referring to them as whores. As, there's no more perfect word. I said I wouldn't apologize, but I do need to apologize because it is a nasty word. But there is no other word that can describe what we are saying here. Right? Because even the Bible, when it talks, it needs to say that word. Okay, anyway, it's derogatory. So every time that you're saying Ibn Marjana to describe Yazid, why didn't you say Ibn Muawiyah? No, you say Ibn Marjana. Why? Because this is alluding to his mother being that. So every time you read Ziyat Ashura, you don't know what you're actually implying. That's what you're implying. Would the Ahlul Bayt talk like that, brother? What do you know about the Ahlul Bayt? Amr ibn As also. How did Imam Ali alayhi salam refer to him? Ibn Nabigha. Right? And the thing is, right, if you go to the Arab-speaking world, a lot of the scholars, they understand these things. They know these things. They know what ala wa ibn ad-da'i means. Right? But when it's translated, it's made so soft. And you're just like, huh? Okay, yeah. MashaAllah, brother, they were so... Alright, but you're going to argue, right? You're going to say at this point that, okay, they're implying it though. Whereas they're not saying it directly. Okay, what about Imam Sadiq alayhi salam? Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he says that the one who killed the camel of Salih, right? The miraculous camel of Salih, he was Ibn Baghi, the son of a whore. وَإِنَّ قَاتِلَ يَحْيَى بِن زَكَرِيَّا, the one who killed Yahya alayhi salam. Who was that killer? Who was that murderer? Ibn Baghi. It can't be clearer than that. He's literally using the word. And he says the ones who killed Ibn Baghi, he's saying it over and over again. The one who killed Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he was Ibn Baghi. And then he says, لَمْ يُقْتَلِ الْأَنْبِيَاء, nobody killed, anybody who kills the children of prophets or prophets, those murderers, they're nobody except أَوْلَادُ الْبَغَايَا, the sons of whores. I don't want to be actually saying these words, but you have to understand again that the vision that you have of the Ahlul Bayt and their companions and the way that they spoke, they were not so policed as we are today. And they would sit and they would listen. And if you are shocked hearing this from me today, you have to understand that perhaps you would have been equally as shocked, of course more shocked, because the Imam of the time alayhi salam saying it, if you were sitting there at that time. Brotherlilies cannot survive the reality of Islam. Brotherlilies and this culture which has been created in the community has nothing to do with Islam. It's completely divorced from the reality of what it means to be a Muslim. The killer of Al-Hussein alayhi salam was a son of that word. And indeed, none killed the prophets except sons of that word. So, in this context, dear brothers and sisters, dear comrades, and forgive me in advance for saying this, but somebody in this context, somebody would be justified, entirely justified, when it comes to the Trump. Trump has literally killed the offspring of the Ahlulbayt. He has killed the actual Sayyid, perhaps the best man alive, aside from Imam Mahdi alayhi salam himself. Trump has murdered him and boasted about it, and astaghfirullah, somebody would be entirely justified in calling him a bastard son of a whore. And that's what Trump actually is. All right, and I'm not going to stand it like I will actually. I'm not going to say that I'm not, because when I'm talking about these publicly, outside of the context of this lecture, I'm not going to use such words. What I'm going to say is, if anything, is Trump is like illegitimately born, or his mother's nasty, his father's nasty, his old lineage is nasty. I'll say something like that, which is much more acceptable for our community to hear. Of course I'm going to talk like that because I'm a scholar. I have to talk like that. But what I want you to understand is that if you see others speaking in this way, it is not necessarily something that you need to be shocked about. In fact, you should be happy about it. You should be happy that they're insulting them. You should be happy that these youths are out there expressing themselves in the way that they should express themselves instead of policing the rhetoric. It becomes so inhibiting to any kind of progress. Because every time somebody wants to speak against the villains, speak against the evildoers, speak against the tyrants, they think to themselves, oh, would this be acceptable? Jesus Christ, how are we supposed to make any progress? All right. I want to bring up another word here, which is a word that I don't like. It makes me feel uncomfortable, but I'm going to say it, and that word is nigger. I hate the word nigger, okay? They use it in a very nasty way. And this is the way it works. And I am not saying these things just for their shock value. I want you to understand certain things. As a scholar, part of my duty is to break social taboos which have become a hindrance for us to understand the deen. Okay? And the word nigger, the way it has been contextualized is just... White people aren't allowed to say it. Black people are allowed to say it. When white people say it, it's usually done by white supremacists who want to say the nastiest things about black people in a totally unacceptable and racist manner. When black people say it, it's seen as this cool thing that is okay and socially acceptable. The word implies that it's talking about black slaves. Black slaves. Slaves of what? Slaves of freaking the great Satan America. Not only should the white people in America not use this word to degrade black people, but black people really shouldn't use it either because of its origins and because of what it means in the context. But whatever, people want to use it, fine, use it, whatever. The thing that I want to draw our attention to is the idea that we are conforming to an American paradigm. An American paradigm, an American culture. The whole issue around the word, the nigger word, it's all an American paradigm. Did my ancestors enslave millions of black people from Africa, and have I benefited in any way from enslaving an entire race of people? No. So why is it off limits for me? Or, for example, would it make sense for one like me to use that word in the same way that the white supremacists use it? No. But that's how it is. And in this way, we're actually conforming to the great Satan America. Right? By not saying it, we're conforming to them. By saying it, we're conforming to them. And this is the entire hegemony of America, the way it controls people's minds. Now, with that in mind, I want to bring you to back to the concept of the brotherlily issue that we face in this community, because what they've essentially done is sucked the life out of any kind of discourse. They've destroyed our ability to even think in certain in certain ways. Two words are off limits, according to the mainstream hegemonic narrative as espoused by America and by the World Economic Forum and the West collectively, and the powers that be. Retard and faggot. Retard and faggot. Why am I not allowed to say these words? I'll tell you why. Because they want to soften the narrative. Soften the narrative in order to make sin and degeneracy more acceptable. And I want to give you an example of how I experienced this firsthand. When I was a teacher in a secondary school, it was a girls' secondary school, and I remember they called for a staff meeting, and all these female teachers, it's mostly going to be female teachers because it's a girls' school. There were some guy teachers there as well, but mostly women. And they're just ultra leftist feminists, and they're sitting there and they're talking about how we need to empower these little girls to be strong, independent women, and we should tell them to put on makeup and wear tight skirts and go to parties, and they should be free to. And she was like entirely pushing this culture, and at a certain point I couldn't take it, and I said, listen, this makes no sense. You're endangering these women, these girls who are soon going to be women, by pushing this kind of thing. Hear it from me. I'm a man, okay? Every woman is potentially prey for us. And we're constantly hungry. This is how men see the world. All right? And it might sound weird for me to say it in this way. Dear sisters, you don't know the way that men think. Okay, if I put myself into the mind of a woman for even a moment, it's just completely different. It's entirely different. Imam Khomeini, you know what he said? He said, I didn't say this in the staff meeting, obviously, I'm just telling you. But he said, if women knew how men perceive them, they would cover themselves in armor, like a whole bodysuit of iron armor. You don't know how men see you. So I was telling them in this staff meeting, these girls, you're telling them to dress up and doll themselves up and go into society. You don't know what men are like. They're going to endanger these girls. These girls are going to become victims. They're going to endure horrible abuse from men. They're going to face horrible things because of this. And I said it in a kind of funny way. And the male teacher next to me, who had been silent the entire time, he just goes, he puts his thumb up and he's like, good one. Somebody had to say it. Huh, what's going on? Now you look at society, and this is what they've done. They've pushed entirely false narratives, and they've done this in a way that has endangered society now. Youths don't know what they're going to face. Their parents don't know what they're going to face in school, and they're not armed. And how have they accomplished this? By softening language. Softening language. They're not pedophiles anymore. They're minor attracted persons. It's not buggery or sodomy. They're not faggots. They're gays. What the hell? They're not mentally ill people. They're just gender dysphoric. They're not Jews. They're Zionists. What have we done? What have we done with the entire narrative? And if you look at the Quran in the Ahlulbayt, they said things straight. It was never like this. That's what Islam is. It says things so clear, so straight. It tells you to your face. That's the truth. And so this is something that the West has done, but the community has conformed to it to a lesser or greater extent. And so what happens is, and I'm sure it's happening in the Sunni world as well. And I've seen examples of it happening in the Sunni world as well. But I want to focus on the Shia world because I'm from the Shia community and I've had more experience with the Shias. We've created a community bubble. A community bubble where inside this bubble everything is hunky-dory and, everybody speaks politely and, oh, yes, brother, no, brother. Oh. What's wrong with that? You'll say, what's wrong with that? That's a good thing. We have our own community. No, it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing at all, because we are living in la land. We're living in an entirely disconnected, alternate reality. I remember when I was working at Ahlulbayt TV back in London, before I came to the Hausa, they had a youth show and they invited me to come to the show. I said, oh, great, they're having a youth show. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go dressed as a youth. So I had my hoodie and I had my gum in my mouth and I'm sitting there. And all the other youths are told to come, they come wearing suits and ties. And all the questions that they are asking the sheikh who's sitting there are just the most dry, pacifist, milquetoast questions that are so easy to answer. It's like you could look it up on Wikipedia. It was so obviously staged in a way to make them look like the most good kids. All right, so the reason I'm telling you this is because the Shia community has purposefully manufactured this image of what it means to be a good Shia youth. And let me tell you, it ain't good. It's fake. It's pretend. All right? In reality, a Muslim youth, a true Shia youth, he's gangster. He's so cool. He says it how it is. He's not afraid of anything. He's not afraid of speaking the truth, nor is he afraid of getting into physical altercations. That's how a Muslim youth was supposed to be. But the way we've presented it is that there's these prim and proper, perfect little Persies, brotherlilies. We've actually manufactured brotherlilies. Now you fast forward like 12 years that I've been in the Hausa now, and I step back, I look at the Hausa system, and I realize, Jesus Christ, we're manufacturing these people. It's like an assembly line. They come in, even if they have fire, when they come to the Hausa, they're passionate, they're ready to, speak spoken word poetry. They want to make music for the muqawama, for the resistance. They want to do all sorts of things that might be seen as taboo. They come into the Hausa, they leave as carbon copies of every other brotherlily that's out there. They never contribute anything except perpetuating the status quo that we've created. They never challenge any of the things that exist in the society. They never break any idols, or that's what we've done. I want to give you an example of this now, and I mentioned it in the previous Fire at Will video, but I want you to pay attention to it. Ken O'Keefe, may Allah bless him, he was brought to Iran. He came to Iran. He's doing a tour of Iran, and he's going to different organizations. He goes to a certain revolutionary platform, and they censor him. I want us to really wake up. Who is Ken O'Keefe? If you look it up, he is a person who is very outspoken. He's burned his American passport. He's a person who used to be a Marine. He abandoned that way of life. He understood that America is the great Satan. He might not use our terminology. He might not say great Satan. He might not even say death to America. But I wouldn't doubt it if he has said on occasions, F America. He's on haqq, actually. He's on the truth, or at least on the path towards the truth. This so-called revolutionary platform censored him. Like, Allahu Akbar, like, you have to understand my pain here. Okay, so this reveals three things. Number one, it reveals that our community has a non-acceptance for outside discourse and outsiders. All right, and this is a problem. Why? Because we are not able to bring outsiders in. And it's not because of their ideological stances. It's not because they don't stand against America. No, they do stand against America. It's not because they don't stand against Israel. They do stand against Israel. Why are we rejecting such people? I'll tell you why. Because they swear. Because they're, in our cultural perception, foul-mouthed. This is unacceptable. And this shows an intolerance to other cultures. In other cultures, it's not swearing for them. You have to understand this. For us, it's swearing. For them, it's like saying rascal. Number two, it shows that we have an inability to do da'wah. We haven't done da'wah. We haven't done da'wah almost at all. Dear brothers and sisters, dear comrades, I'm not going to give you examples to prove this point. You just have to look at the culture of the Shia world. We're not even interested in da'wah. We're not interested in bringing people towards the faith. If we were, then all of this arba'een, the people who are going to travel to Imam Hussein, would be converted in a different direction. They would say, let's put all of this human effort into bringing people towards the path of haqq. All of these majalis that we have, and all of these juluses that we have, and all of these community efforts that we take in youth clubs that we have, this would actually be converted into actually putting people on the street, handing out leaflets so that they can bring people towards the path of haqq. The problem is we don't even know what the path of haqq is. If we spoke it, people would be interested in it. I'm not saying that the Ahlulbayt themselves are saying that. Imam Rida alayhi salam said, if people heard mahasina kalamina, if they heard the goodness of our words, lattabi'una, they would have followed us. Whose fault is it then that nobody's following the Ahlulbayt out there? It's our fault. The Shia, so-called Shia. If we were truly following the Ahlulbayt, we would have spread the words of the Ahlulbayt everywhere, far and wide. We didn't. And Ken O'Keefe is a great example of this. He came to our community. It was a great opportunity to tell him, hey, listen, there's only one God, and Muhammad is his messenger. We didn't do that. Why? Because even if he did say that, I want to make this very clear. We as a community we do not have the capacity to accept people like that because of our closed-mindedness, because of the bubble that we've created. Even if he were to say, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, Aliyun Waliullah, even if he were to come to that understanding because of the clothes he wears, because of the tattoos, because of the culture that many of these Westerners have, we are the ones who don't find it acceptable. We are the ones who will say, oh, these people are not good for our community. We're so backwards, honestly. Astaghfirullah. And number three, it's an inability to assimilate. And I'm not saying we should assimilate in the way that the enemies speak about assimilation and the enemy governments talk about assimilation. No. I'm talking about being part of the place that you're living in, for God's sake. And so much of the Shia community is not that. They're not part of the crowd. All right? They go to, I'll take it from the top to the bottom. The Maulanas, you talk to them, you say, hey, listen, you don't know what the youths are going through. How can you say that? I've traveled all across the world. I've gone to Tanzania and I've gone to this place. Yes, but Maulana, you got off on your little plane. You went to a certain bubble community. Then you left and you went back to another bubble community. You've never been to the streets. You never talked to the homeless people. You never talked to the kids, the drug addicts. You never talked to the prisoners in the prisons. You never did any of that stuff. You don't know what these people are going through. All right, so that's at the top level. That's how scholars are meant to be. There's even a hadith which I can't remember, but off the top of my head, it's something like, don't trust any of the scholars who associate with the sultans, with the kings. The opposite is also true. You're supposed to be with the poorest of the community, the people who are at the lowest. Then you go to the community leaders. These community leaders, so-called community leaders, who are they? They're usually people who have migrated from a different country. They've come to this country, or England or America or wherever it is in the Western world or the Eastern world, and they're just part of this community. No, I go to work. That's not good enough. Then you come to the people who are actually being raised in school. Like, look at Gen Zs now, look at millennials now. They're just messed up in the head. Because nobody knew or understood the pains that they're going through or could identify with it. But they're actually the ones who have assimilated, and not in the good way that I'm talking about, in the bad way, where they've actually adopted the culture of the enemy and the ideologies of the enemy. All right? But what we needed to do is assimilate in a good way, which means that you're actually part of the people that you're living with. And had we been part of the people that we're living amongst, then you would have seen Muslims crying out in pain when the government cuts the pay of nurses or the pay of teachers. You would have seen Muslim scholars leading those kinds of demonstrations among the socialists. But they're not. Because they don't know what the pains of the society are. They're living in a bubble. And when you live in a bubble, you're not able to understand what those people are going through. And this bubble is part of the reason why so much hypocrisy exists. Okay? And this hypocrisy, this swearing, this entire thing about swearing and insulting others, the reason we haven't understood it is because of the hypocrisy, the underlying hypocrisy that actually pervades throughout the society. Everybody swears, guys. It's such a normal thing, okay? Yeah, maybe not publicly, but a lot of these scholars who you see on the pulpits and a lot of these good boys, you go to the back rooms and you see that they're swearing among their friends. Because it's a really normal thing for people to do. Especially when they're going through some sort of emotional thing. Now, there might be some people who never swear. Ever, ever, ever. Good for them, fantastic. I went through a period in my life where I never swore either. I did away with it completely because school, when you grow up in a school in Southeast England, oh my God, they are vulgar. I mean, the things, it's very difficult not to swear. Unless you want to be like a very strange tangent person, which I don't want to be. I want to fit in at least a little bit. Okay? But behind the scenes, many of these people swear. And let me tell you, many of these scholars who you admire and you think that they're so pious and everything, behind the scenes, they say some nasty things, which I'm not going to mention. Okay, but just take it from me, all right? Behind the scenes, a lot of these brotherlilies who will lecture you and say, oh, brother, your language, brother. Behind the scenes, they're actually swearing. And they're saying way viler things than swearing. I wouldn't even be surprised. I won't say that, but anyway. So, another hadith now. The Prophet said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allah has prohibited Jannah. Heaven is prohibited to those who use obscenity, vulgarity, lack shame, and are not concerned about what is said or not said to them. That is really condemning, isn't it? It's really harsh. What does the Arabic say? إِنَّ اللَّهَ حَرَّمَ الْجَنَّةَ عَلَى كُلِّ فَحَّاشٍ بَذِيءٍ قَلِيلِ الْحَيَاءِ لَا يُبَالِي مَا قَالَ وَلَا مَا قِيلَ لَهُ. Okay. So it's actually saying, a person who has these traits, Jannah is not allowed for them. A person who is fahashin badi, like he's always using obscenity and swearing constantly. Qalil al-haya, they have no haya, no modesty, right? La yubali maqa, and he doesn't care what other people say about him and what is said to him. Okay, so that's a hadith, all right? And I want to bring this hadith into it as well. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he said, obscene language, foulness and imprudence are all from hypocrisy. Al-fahshu wal-badha'u was-salatatu min al-nifaq. Okay, so just very quickly. So al-fuhsh, we've talked about that, right? That's obscenity. Wal-badha'. This is more akin to the idea of, it's an open term, right? Insulting, any kind of profanity. Was-salatatu. This, salatatu, is really important in the context of this hadith. It means a person who is sharp-tongued. They say hurtful things, actual hurtful things. And these things, this hadith, this particular hadith is saying it's from nifaq, from hypocrisy. So it's talking about an underlying spiritual disease, right? Hypocrisy. And these things are from that. Hypocrisy. That's what we're going to be talking about. This particular hadith, I just wanted to point out that it's da'if ala al-mashhur. It is weak, according to most of the ulama. But I don't like using that as an example to just dismiss it. Okay, so we have to be conscious that some of these things may be from nifaq, from hypocrisy. What is hypocrisy though? That's what I want us to ask. Hypocrisy is when you do one thing in public and one thing, and an entirely different thing. You believe in an entirely different thing in private. And now I want to talk about this Shia syndrome. Astaghfirullah Rabbi wa atubu ilayh. And I'm so sad that I have to talk about this. Because this is really what I'm getting to when it comes to the brotherlilies and their mentality. The brotherlilies are everywhere. You'll always see them doing this. Brother, don't do this. Brother, this is haram. Blah, 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 blah. All right? But when you break it down, you have to understand that so much of the Shia community has gone far, far astray. And these such things are applicable to all of them. When we began by explaining what the word al-fuhsh means, remember that we said that it means not vulgarity, obscenity. All right? Astaghfirullah. I'm really, really sorry to have to say this, but astaghfirullah. But okay, so a large amount of Shias have this fixation, this unhealthy fixation with Ummul Mu'mineen Sayyida Aisha, the mother of the believers, Aisha, the wife of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they call her Aisha al-Fahisha. Aisha Fahisha, you hear it all the time among these foul-mouthed, disgusting individuals. All right? And these same people are, I'm telling you right now, they are the same types of people who, when you swear against the Taghut, they will come to you and say, brother, don't do that, brother. Okay, so let me get this straight. And astaghfirullah Rabbi wa atubu ilayh. Let me get this straight. So you can say the most foul, indecent, evil, fahish things about the wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But when some random youth says, F the Jews or F America, you're like, oh brother, you're sudden. This is the hypocrisy that I really want us to understand. And this is so prevalent in the Shia community that it's become an entire culture. An entire culture. Eid al-Zahra, for example. Everybody say Eid al-Zahra. It's Eid al-Zahra. I hate it when somebody says Eid Mubarak to me on Eid al-Zahra. I don't tell them, but this is entirely made up. It's a fiction, for crying out loud. It is a bid'ah. Bid'ah. One of those things that we're going to talk about in a moment. But I want you to keep that in mind. It is an innovation made by the Shia, the so-called Shia. The Quran. And what do they do in these gatherings? We know what they do in these gatherings. They all get together. Umar is this. Abu Bakr is this. Aisha is that. And I'm telling you, man, the things they say is disgusting. Absolutely foul. Absolutely evil. And it never occurs to them that all of these ahadith, instead of applying it to themselves and understanding how gravely they have transgressed all of these ahadith that we've mentioned in this lecture so far, instead of understanding that, they apply it to some random guy swearing. They can't understand that somebody swearing for emphatic purpose in the context of an Islamic paradigm, which is actually to speak against the Taghut, against the tyrants, that's unacceptable. But doing it in the context of the wives of the Prophet and the companions of the Prophet, that's okay. I'm sorry, astaghfirullah, I do bara'ah from all of these types of Shia. And even, look, and I'm saying a little bit more gently now, dear brothers and sisters who are in the Shia community, I want you to question, like the decent ones among you, you know, the ones who can understand what I'm saying. Dear comrades, I want you to just think about this for a moment. If you are comfortable with insulting Aisha and Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and all of these figures who are beholden by the Sunnis, if you can do that in private, but you wouldn't do it in public, is this not a form of hypocrisy? I just want us to question. Because for me personally, I can't do that. It is really, and by the way, I don't want anybody to misconstrue what I am saying and think that I'm saying that they're perfect and they're ma'asoom and they've never committed mistakes. No! What they did might have been atrocious. It was terrible. It was despicable. Mu'mineen, Sayyida Aisha, she is the mother of the believers. She went to war against Imam Ali alayhi salam. She committed one of the gravest sins. You cannot go against the Imam of your time according to the Shia. You cannot go against the Khalif of the age according to the Sunnis. This is a crime and it is indefensible, and you can't say that this is something justifiable in whatever way and capacity you try and say it. Okay, I'm not going against that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the way we choose to compose ourselves in certain majalis, in certain sitting places, where we feel like we have every right to insult, to use foul language, to say evil things, despicable things, and we're doing it privately. Would you do the same thing publicly? So how can you say that that's not a form of hypocrisy? I don't know. The Holy Quran says, النَّبِيُّ أَوْلَى بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ مِنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَأَزْوَاجُهُ أُمَّهَاتُهُمْ. The Prophet, the Messenger, is greater. He has a greater right over the believers than even themselves. The Prophet has a greater right over you than you have over your own self. And his wives are as their mothers. Now I understand, and I'm Shia, I'm a scholar. I understand the Shia arguments, the typical Shia arguments, that this verse is only talking about how nobody is allowed to marry the wives of the Prophet after him. And I understand why this would be important, because so many of the sharks in that community and in that society wanted to hijack positions of authority in order to mislead the ummah after the Prophet. Totally understand that, okay? And don't bring your Shia arguments here. Your Rafida arguments here, I don't like them, okay? It's pathetic, because even if you have a number of ahadith, millions of ahadith, which you don't, but let's say that you do, the Quran is the Quran. You have to do ruju' to the Quran, and any believer who reads these verses and these beautiful lines cannot deny that the maqam and the position of the wives of the Prophet was like the mothers. It is like the mothers. And it doesn't, by the way, the Quran doesn't even say like their mothers. It says they're your mothers. Let's say that your mother did something terrible. Would you go and insult your mother? You wouldn't, right? So how come it's okay to do it for the wives of the Prophet, who are your spiritual mothers? I don't understand. And I do bara'ah from this entire culture that the Shia community has made, and they've inculcated it so deeply into the religion that they actually convince everybody that it's part of our deen. If you don't do this, you're not a Shia. Okay, I'm not a Shia then. If that's what it means to be a Shia, I'll happily say I'm not a Shia. Okay? Because I can bet that if the Ahlulbayt were here, they are the ones who are going to decide who's Shia and who's not. And they would never look at your foul behavior and say, oh yeah, you're one of our Shia. And I can bet that when Imam Zaman alayhi salam comes, he is going to be furious with the Shia community for what they have done. And I'm not talking about all Shias, but the brotherlilies. The ideas that they are espousing stems from a certain pseudo-Shia paradigm that we all need to understand. And I've talked about this in great length, and I've exposed some of the figureheads of British Shiaism, and I would urge anybody who hasn't watched those videos to dig them up from wherever they are not censored anymore and actually watch them. To date, nobody in the entire Shia world has ever picked up those videos and brought even one logical Islamic argument to refute them. That should be evidence enough for you, dear brothers and sisters, dear comrades, that what I've been saying all along has been right. And I know it's been right because it is in line with what our greats have said. The actual ulama, not the fake ulama, the real ulama, like Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, like Imam Khamenei. The shuhada who have proven now their actual sincerity to the deen by giving their lives in this path. Whereas all these scholars, what do? They're just soaking up the wealth and the money of the ummah in order, and not breaking any taboos, just so that they can perpetuate all of this garbage that we call the deen. Astaghfirullah Rabbi wa atubu ilayh. The Quran is telling you, وَلَا تَسُبُّوا الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ فَيَسُبُّوا اللَّهَ عَدْوًا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. It's telling you, don't insult. Sub, by the way, if you see sub in a hadith, that would have been a valid argument. Don't insult. Okay, so this verse is saying, don't insult their gods. Perchance they might turn around and insult your God without having knowledge of it. So if somebody's doing shirk, the Quran is telling you don't insult their gods, right? So imagine the so-called Shia who can't even put aside this issue. We're not even talking about idols here. We're actually just talking about political figures of that time. They can't even put that aside. All right, so this is not just a discussion about unity, but I want you to understand how all of these things tie together. And this culture is actually perpetuated by people who want the status quo to continue. They're not actually the real representatives of the deen, right? إِنَّ مِن شَرِّ عِبَادِ اللَّهِ مَن تُكْرَهُ مُجَالَسَةُهُ. This is a hadith, by the way. مُجَالَسَتُهُ لِفُحْشِ. So I'm just going to give you the correct translation of this. Indeed, among the worst of God's servants is the one whose company people dislike because of their obscenity. Okay? This hadith is used to prove that, oh, your swearing is bad, brother. Are you kidding me? Are you seriously kidding me? And please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not bringing up a straw argument here. I am very well aware that many of these brotherlilies are not those who curse the Sahaba and the wives of the Prophet. I know that. Many of them are revolutionaries. I am aware of that, okay? So I'm not using this just to, push them all under the same rug. I'm not doing that. The idea here is that they will bring this hadith and they will say, look, the hadith shows that if you sit in the company of one who constantly does al-fuhsh, and because of that they're hated, Allah, he's a vile servant, he's a vile person. And they can't compute that this is not just talking about swearing or curse words. Those things which because of your culture and your upbringing you find abhorrent. No, it's not just talking about that. It's talking about certain majalis where you go there and they talk about all sorts of nasty things, about all sorts of people. Okay, now I want to bring the discussion to bid'ah. Okay, because a huge reason why we haven't understood a lot of this, the reason we're only scratching the surface here, and the reason why I've had to talk about this for so long, is because of bid'ah. And I know what you're going to think, why didn't you do a separate lecture? It's because I just want to get this out, okay? I don't want to come back to this discussion, and I really hope that it just goes away after this. When it comes to the main issues in Islam, there's no talk about it, right? When you introduce a culture in Islam, and that culture now becomes inculcated within people's idea of what Islam is, that is bid'ah. And this is such a huge, monstrous crime. I'm holding a book right now. This book, Sayyid Abdullah pointed this out because I was discussing this subject before him. Who wrote this book? Ayatollah al-Uzma Shaykh Jawadi Amuli. Okay, you ask any of the revolutionaries, they understand who this person is. He's he's probably the biggest marja in Iran right now. All right, so he's saying, he's brought this hadith from Al-Kafi, and I found the hadith in Al-Kafi itself. He says, إِذَا رَأَيْتُمْ أَهْلَ الرَّيْبِ وَالْبِدْعِ مِنْ بَعْدِي. When you see people after me who are people of doubts, like they're using rayb, they're using doubts, and bid'ah after me, فَأَظْهِرُوا الْبَرَاءَةَ مِنْهُمْ. Make clear your bara'ah from them. Make clear your bara'ah from them. You know what bara'ah is. In the Shia culture, they talk about bara'ah, 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 but they never explain to you what it means. It means disassociation. Not just from Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman, the way that they have framed it. No, it's from all sorts of people, whoever does wrong in society. And the Holy Prophet ﷺ is saying, when you see anybody doing bid'ah, you should make clear your bara'ah from them. وَأَكْثَرُوا مِن سَبِّهِمْ. Subhanallah. And increase your insults against them. And the hadith goes on, but I'm not going to read the entire hadith. But the idea here is how important it is to call out bid'ah. And this is why I just want to bring Sayyid Jawad Naqvi into this. Sayyid Jawad Naqvi, I understand that there's all sorts of controversies and etc. And people, I don't know what's going on in Pakistan, okay? There's so many scholars in Pakistan, so much going on. All right, I'm not endorsing anything. If Sayyid Jawad Naqvi's done anything bad, whatever, okay? But I'm just talking about this isolated thing that he did way back in the day when I made the British Shiaism, the first one, against the likes of Ammar Naqshwani. Nobody supported it, right? Among the brotherlily companions that are around, even though behind the scenes, I want you to know, they all knew the truth. They all knew that this person is completely full of nifaq. He's a hypocrite, and he's clearly and obviously misguiding people. None of them talked about it. Sayyid Jawad Naqvi, at least he branded him as Allama Tattoo. Allama Tattoo. So he was using this Allama Tattoo as a derogatory insult for Ammar Naqshwani. Why? Because Ammar Naqshwani wears tattoos. It's not about his tattoos, by the way. Tattoos are not haram. We don't care about tattoos, right? It's the idea that when you say something like this, when you insult somebody, immediately who's going to jump down your throat? The brotherlilies. No, brother, how can you say that, brother? Oh my God, astaghfirullah. Allama Sayyid Jawad Naqvi, at least he said that, and he said it publicly, you know, and that was comforting, at least, alhamdulillah. But when you look at the discourse that exists out there, even though you see that somebody is a clear fasiq, nobody says anything. Nobody does anything. And if they do it so softly, they soften their own narrative to such an extent. No, I won't insult, I won't do this. Why not? Why bloody not? I don't get it anymore. What's wrong with the youths? I feel like Imam Khomeini. Astaghfirullah, I'm nothing like Imam Khomeini. Imam Khomeini was, he was nearly a prophet. Okay, that's my opinion of Imam Khomeini. Okay, I'm nothing like Imam Khomeini, but I feel like the same thing is happening again, where I'm sitting here and I'm telling you, what's wrong with your youths? Are they dead? Are you dead out there? He said, look, if you see somebody who is evil, who is misguiding the community, who's a pacifist, who's justifying tyranny, knock their turban off their head. Who's Naqshwani? Who gives a damn about him? There's so many scholars now who are perpetuating the same retarded Shia narrative, and nobody's speaking against them. Do you not know the Quran? Do you not know the Ahlulbayt? Do you not know the Hadith? Of course you do. Who's stopping you? You're scared. And I'll tell you who you're scared of. You're not scared of the police. You're not scared of the government. You're not scared of the Taghut even. You're scared of the brotherlilies. That's who you're scared of. The community leaders. That's who you're scared of. You're scared that auntie so-and-so is going to come along and say, oh, you shouldn't say it in that way, brother. That's what you're actually scared of. It's like what David Icke said. He said, the people have out-sheeped the sheep. Because sheep, at least they need a sheep dog to keep them in line. Whereas human beings, we keep each other in line. Why are you allowing the sheep to sheep you? Why are you allowing these sheep to herd you? Break out of this bubble, for crying out loud. Wake up. I mean, you can if you want to. I mean, now it's already too late. I mean, we're very close to the Dhuhr. And it would be nice if you do it now, but I mean, it's up to you. But I'm saying, like, what the heck? What has to happen for this community to bloody wake up? What has to happen? Does Rahbar have to be killed? Does Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah have to be killed before we wake up? Do 70,000 people have to die in Palestine for us to wake up? Does Ismail Hania have to be shaheed? Does Shaheed Sinwar have to be killed? Does Al-Aqsa storm have to begin before we wake up? What is left, honestly? What is bloody left? And we're discussing swearing. Astaghfirullah Rabbi wa atubu ilayh. Sake. If right now I light up a cigarette, the whole world will lose their bloody minds. How can you smoke, brother? Is it haram? The priorities are completely askew. That's what you have to understand. The priorities have become something else entirely. It is not Islam. And they tell me, oh, when you're giving a lecture, why can't you be calm about it? What is there to be calm about? Why do you have to be controversial? Islam is controversial. Then let me just get rid of my Islam. Honestly, let me get rid of the Quran and a Hadith. Let me just go to a desert island somewhere and live there the rest of my life. Honestly, what are we doing? Astaghfirullah Rabbi wa atubu ilayh. They'll bring the verse of the Quran, right? Which verse am I talking about? وَلَا تَلْمِزُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَلَا تَنَابَزُوا بِالْأَلْقَابِ. Surah 49 verse 11. Right, what does it say? Do not insult one another, don't insult one another, and do not call each other by nicknames. How are you supposed to argue with that now? This is what the brotherlilies will do. Completely take a verse of the Quran out of context. Okay, so if that's true, then so I'm not allowed to call my brother, my friend by a nickname? Does that make any sense? So why did Rasulullah call Imam Ali alayhi salam Abu Turab? Okay, so it's only talking about negative nicknames. We're not allowed to give people negative nicknames, right? Okay, fine. So why did we call that uncle of the Prophet who was a kafir and a polytheist, why did we call him Abu Jahl, which literally means the father of ignorance? You don't have an answer. Because again, it's the context that matters. You are allowed to swear, you're allowed to insult, you're allowed to be free. When it comes to the enemy, I mean, Imam Khomeini was so desperate about this issue, now I'm understanding it, that he said, let all of your shu'ar, all of your shouts out against the great Satan America. Whatever you want to say it in that direction, for crying out loud. These brotherlilies turn it around to your own direction. They want you to, and I'm saying brotherlilies, but it's so many people in the Shia community. They've completely turned retarded. Did you know, we're not allowed to use nicknames, brother. How can you say such a thing? Okay. Did you know that the Holy Prophet, I'll give you this hadith. Okay, and like I said, I'm going to share all of these hadith on the channel, inshallah. He called Marwan one of the biggest enemies of the Prophet and of Islam. What did he call him? He called him Ibn al-Wazaq. Ibn al-Wazaq. Wazagh. My throat's gone a little bit dry. It means this lizard son of a lizard. This lizard son of a lizard. The prophets and messengers, they're not the way that you think that they were. They had a sense of humor. They were down to earth. They were human. Guess what? They bled. They felt pain when they were hurt, and they delivered pain when they delivered it. And then we go to the Quran. Oh my God, the Quran. Subhanallah. Does it not say, مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ حُمِّلُوا التَّوْرَاةَ ثُمَّ لَمْ يَحْمِلُوهَا كَمَثَلِ الْحِمَارِ يَحْمِلُ أَسْفَارًا? Does it not say those who, the example rather, of those who were given Torah, but they did not act on it? They're like donkeys carrying volumes of books. The Quran insults people. And you'll say, oh no, brother, but you... Again, that word, brother, don't call me that. I would prefer you to call me what's in your heart, which is, you vile person, I would prefer you to say what's in your heart. All right, and if you love me, then, call me anything. Just don't call me akhi. I don't mind that, Call me the Arabic word for brother. Call me akhi. Okay, if you really want to say that. All right, but don't do it, okay? But they'll say, no, brother, the Quran is saying that, but it doesn't mention anyone by name. And this is a constant argument that you hear over and over again. Don't mention them by name. There's plenty of people that I don't mention by name. Some people have crossed those boundaries and therefore they need to be called out. And if I don't call them out, people don't understand who's being talked about. Okay, and that's just the reality. All right? And if you say that all of these things exist in the Quran, but you're not allowed to apply them to anyone, then sorry, but you're a donkey carrying volumes of books. So you know the truth, you know its application, but you never apply it. The Quran calls people dogs. I'm not going to go through the verses, right? It calls a person dog. Both of these examples, these Quranic examples, by the way, have been, Sayyid Abdullah told me this just before I started recording. Both of them are done in the context of scholars. All right, one is the scholars of Bani Israel who were given the Torah, and then the one where it says, مَثَلَهُ كَمَثَلِ الْكَلْبِ. His example is like the example of a dog. Right? Where does the Quran say this? Again, in the context of a certain scholar who wanted to curse Musa alayhi salam. The Quran says, it says all sorts of things like, they have eyes with which they don't see, hearts with which they don't hear, and all that. And then it says, أُولَٰئِكَ كَالْأَنْعَامِ. They're like cattle, they're like cows, they're like goats, they're like sheep. That's what they are. The Quran itself is telling you this, right? And then of course it says كَأَنَّهُمْ حُمُرٌ مُسْتَنْفِرَةٌ. Those who deny the verses of the signs of Allah, when they come to them, they كَأَنَّهُمْ حُمُرٌ مُسْتَنْفِرَةٌ. They're like donkeys or zebra. فَرَّتْ مِنْ قَصْوَرَةٍ. Running away from a lion. That's what they're like. Okay? And I've gone way over my time, and I've said a lot that I needed to say on the subject. So I just want to end with this one hadith that I hope makes you, again, go back, at the very least, go back and analyze your own perception of what it means to curse and to insult, where it's allowed, where it's not allowed. Okay, Zuhair ibn Qayn, right? One of the very, very applauded, upheld, high, esteemed companions of Imam Hussein alayhi salam in Karbala. What did he say to Shimr? Shimr tried to address him, he tried to talk to him, he said, يَبْنَ الْبَوَّالِ عَلَى الْعَقِبَيْ مَا إِيَّاكَ أُخَاطِبْ. And the translation of that is so weird, it's debated to this day. It's basically saying, you're the son of the guy who pees on his heels, or he pees backwards. It's a really, really strange insult. It's not just insulting him, it's insulting his father. And he's saying this to who? To Shimr, right? He's like saying, I'm not even talking to you, your father pissed himself. Or something like that, right? Now, when it's translated, it's going to, I don't know how that would be translated. If you were to stumble across this hadith, I don't know how it would be translated. Maybe it would be like something, oh, ye son of the one who occasionally urinated upon himself, or something strange like that. Oh, come on. You're in the battlefield, you're not going to talk like that. For crying out loud. Can we humanize the Ahlulbayt again, for Christ's sake? Can we make them what they were again, please? And these are the companions of the Prophet and Ahlulbayt alayhimus salam, the most esteemed ones among them. Okay, and again, I just want to close this entire discussion by reminding you and waking you up perhaps to the reality that our heroes, the Ahlulbayt alayhimus salam, the companions of the Ahlulbayt, they weren't the way that the brotherlilies present them. They were gangster, they were hardcore. There is a hadith which I've shared before where Abu Dharr, who's one of the greatest companions of the Prophet, he actually went to one of the oppressors in the little political scheme that they were playing in the time of Imam Ali alayhi salam. He grabs him and he says, you're the son of a Jew. And he actually hit him. So forget about just using words, man. They got to a point where they would actually get into physical altercations with those who were crossing the boundaries and insulting the Prophets and Ahlul Bayt. If you don't have that example, fine. What about Hamza? Hamza alayhi salam, the great uncle of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. When he saw what that munafiq, what that evildoer, what that polytheist was doing, what did he do? He was insulting the Prophet. What did Hamza do? Brother, this is not good akhlaq, brother. Is that what he did? No, he didn't. He went over, he smashed him on the head with his bow. Right, so reanalyze who the Ahlul Bayt actually were. Fix yourself before it's too late. Don't train your children to be pansies. Don't look down on somebody just because they use something which in your culture is seen as foul language. Don't misconstrue so many of these ahadith. Try to dig a little bit deeper and really understand them. And understand that this community has created a bubble around itself from which there is no escape unless you, dear brother, dear sister, dear comrade, have the courage to burst that bubble. And sometimes, in order to burst that bubble, you need to go against social norms. وصلوا على محمد وآل محمد.